In the autumn of 1781, the most powerful army in the world was trapped on a narrow neck of Virginia tobacco land. And the man who had helped spring the trap was, in the eyes of the law, not a man at all. He owned nothing. He could be sold at a word. His name, for the moment, was simply James. He had walked, unarmed, into the enemy's headquarters, won the confidence of the men who held the South in their grip, and carried their secrets out in his head. The generals would be painted into history. He would have to petition for the right to be free. This is the story of the spy who owned nothing. The spy who owned nothing. He was born into slavery in the Virginia Tidewater around the year 1748 in New Kent County, the property of the Armistead family. By the time the colonies broke with the king, James belonged to William Armistead, a planter who had thrown his fortune behind the Revolution and served as a commissary, feeding and supplying Virginia's troops. James was his manservant, trusted, observant, and everywhere at once. The kind of man who is in every room and noticed in none. In the winter of 1781, the war came home to Virginia. The traitor Benedict Arnold, now a general in a British coat, landed with a raiding force and burned his way up the James River. To meet him, Congress sent an improbably young Frenchman, the Marquis de Lafayette, 23 years old, commanding a thin, outnumbered army across a vast and open country. Lafayette's problem was not courage, it was blindness. He could not afford to fight Cornwallis. He could only watch him. And to watch him, he needed eyes inside the British camp. James asked for leave to become those eyes. With William Armistead's consent, he volunteered, not as a soldier, but as something the army had no rank for. He would be a spy. And he carried one advantage no continental officer could buy. To the British, an enslaved man walking toward their lines was not a threat. He was a prize. For 6 years, the Crown had been promising freedom to any enslaved Virginian who would abandon his rebel master and come over to the king.
I do hereby declare all indented servants, Negroes, or others, appertaining to rebels, free, that are able and willing to bear arms, they joining His Majesty's troops.
It was a promise soaked in calculation. The British wanted soldiers and laborers, not liberty for its own sake. But it opened a door, and James walked through it. He presented himself at Arnold's camp at Portsmouth as a runaway, seeking the freedom the king had offered. The British took him in. He made himself useful, guiding their columns along roads he had known since boyhood, fetching, carrying, listening. He was to them exactly what the world insisted he was: invisible. And for a spy, invisibility is everything. What the British never grasped was that the roads ran both ways. Everything James saw inside their lines, the strength of a detachment, the direction of a march, the loose talk of officers over their wine, he carried back out again to the American camp, to Lafayette. He had gone into the enemy's camp at the risk of his life. By the words of his own later petition, that was no small thing.
Your petitioner, at the peril of his life, found means to get into the enemy's lines, and there to collect, and faithfully to deliver, such intelligence as the Marquis required.
In the spring, Arnold sailed north, and James simply transferred his service, or seemed to the new master of the Virginia Theater, Lieutenant General Lord Cornwallis. And here the story turns from daring into something rarer. Cornwallis's officers came to trust James so completely that they hired him for a mission of their own. They asked him to slip into the American camp and spy on Lafayette. So James became, in the oldest and most dangerous sense, a double agent. To the British, he carried scraps, true enough to be believed, useless enough to do no harm, and he carried their questions back to the very general they thought he was betraying. To the Americans, he brought the genuine article, Cornwallis's numbers, his supplies, his intentions. He moved between two armies, trusted by both, belonging, in law, to neither. One slip, one careless word, and he would have hanged as a spy, with no uniform to dignify the rope. Through the summer of 1781, Cornwallis marched and countermarched across the Virginia Peninsula, and James's reports followed him like a shadow. Then, in August, Cornwallis did the fatal thing. He obeyed an order to fortify a deep-water port and wait there for the Royal Navy. He chose a tired little tobacco town on the York River. Its name was Yorktown. What Cornwallis did not know was that the Royal Navy was not coming. A French fleet had seized the mouth of the Chesapeake. Washington and Rochambeau were racing south from New York, and the young Frenchman he had dismissed as a boy was quietly closing the only door out, guided, in part, by intelligence that flowed from a man Cornwallis believed was his own. By late September, more than 17,000 American and French troops had sealed the peninsula. The most formidable army in America was in a net, and the net was being drawn tight. For 3 weeks, the siege guns walked their trenches closer, night by night, until the British works were rubble and the harbor was a field of wrecks. On the 19th of October, 1781, the army of Lord Cornwallis marched out between the silent Allied lines and laid down its arms. It was the blow that broke Britain's will to fight and made a nation possible. Lafayette had his victory. Washington had his miracle. And James, whose eyes had helped find the gap and close it, folded up his disguise and went back to being a slave. This is where most stories of the Revolution end, in fireworks and gratitude. James's was only half over. Virginia did not entirely forget its black soldiers. In 1783, the Assembly voted to free enslaved men who had served in the army, who had shouldered a musket as a substitute for their masters. It was a narrow door, and James did not fit through it. He had carried no gun. He had served as a spy, a laborer, a servant, a courier, and the law that freed the soldier had no category at all for the man who had done something harder. So the spy who had risked the gallows for the American cause remained, by Virginia law, the property of William Armistead, while white veterans who had stood beside him in the lines went home free. He petitioned the Assembly for his liberty. His first petition died in committee, unread. He had helped win a country its freedom, and could not win his own. And then, in November of 1784, the Marquis de Lafayette came back to Virginia. Touring the country he had helped to free, he learned that James was still enslaved, and he sat down and wrote in his own hand a certificate. It is short, it is plain, and it is one of the most consequential testimonials a soldier ever wrote for a man the law refused to count.
This is to certify that the bearer, by the name of James, has done essential services to me while I had the honor to command in this state. His intelligences from the enemy's camp were industriously collected and most faithfully delivered. He perfectly acquitted himself with some important commissions I gave him, and appears to me entitled to every reward his situation can admit of.
Lafayette signed it at Richmond, the 21st of November, 1784. James took that single sheet of paper and built a second petition upon it. This time, William Armistead, by then a member of the House of Delegates, stood with him, and this time the legislature could not look away. The most celebrated general of the alliance had vouched, by name, for a man Virginia still carried on its books as property. On the 9th of January, 1787, the General Assembly of Virginia passed an act to emancipate James, and the governor signed it. The state agreed to pay William Armistead the full value of the man it was setting free, as though liberty were a debt the public owed his owner, and not him. But the words on the page, at last, were the right ones.
Be it enacted that the said James shall, from and after the passing of this act, enjoy as full freedom as if he had been born free.
He took a new surname and chose it with care. Lafayette. James Armistead Lafayette. He farmed some 40 acres in New Kent County, raised a family, and became, in time, something the boy in the Armistead household could never have pictured: a free and propertied man. The contradictions of his age did not spare him. The record suggests that the freed spy, in his turn, came to hold others in bondage, the Revolution's deepest wound, carried even into the household of the man it had nearly forgotten. Late in his life, a grateful and tardy Virginia granted him a pension for his services, a sum for his present relief, and $40 a year for the rest of his days. And in 1824, the wheel came fully around. The Marquis de Lafayette, an old man now, returned to America for a hero's tour, and the cities poured into the streets to meet him. In Richmond, riding through a vast and cheering crowd, the old general's eye caught a face he knew. He ordered his carriage stopped. And before the whole astonished city, Lafayette stepped down and embraced James, the spy, the equal, the friend, by name. We remember Yorktown as a triumph of generals and fleets. We are only beginning to remember the unarmed man who walked into the enemy's tent and carried its secrets out in his head, and who then spent a decade proving, on paper, that he deserved to be free. He had asked for the one wage the Revolution swore it was fighting to pay. He was among the last to receive it. The cause called that freedom self-evident. James Armistead Lafayette had to petition for it and sign for it and wait. That is the part we forget. That is the part worth remembering.